What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the review and discussion for UnOrdianry, episode 316. Honestly, guys, this episode it's really cool, honestly. I liked reading this episode a lot. It is a bit shorter than I would have liked it to be, but overall, I still think that the events of this episode are really impactful to the story, and I am very much looking forward to see where we're going to go from here next. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into this. So, Valerie shows up with her crew. We said that end of last week, episode 315, and on God, she's actually pretty fucking cool, and she's actually really strong, which was to be expected. We all knew she was going to be strong. Honestly, spoiler alert for the episode. I always thought that Arlo would be stronger than her, but in this episode we learned that she's actually stronger than Arlo, which honestly kind of surprised me. I thought he was kind of the pinnacle of their family, but anyway, let's kind of jump into it. So, as she shows up, Arlo is somewhat surprised to see that she's there at her rescue. He has this kind of reaction of like, She came? Like, really? And honestly, I can't see why. Like I mentioned in my reaction, I think that this event is going to definitely kind of push Arlo back into wanting to be on his aunt's side, into wanting to believe that she is a good person, not wanting to believe that she's responsible for Ray's death. Now, like I said before, it makes total complete sense that Arlo does not want to believe for a second that she's the one who killed Ray. Absolutely makes sense, 100%. But it did seem like he may have been coming around to the possibility. He had been doubting her for a bit. He hasn't been answering her messages or anything. But with her coming to his rescue, I do think we'll see a little bit more of Arlo being like, it's my aunt. Like, my aunt's not a bad person. And honestly, completely, totally makes sense. I would not be upset about that decision at all if Uru goes there. Honestly, totally understandable. So, but seeing them there and seeing everyone arrive, Cassandra does tell Arlo, like, I told you we were going to make it out fine. We were going to be okay. And honestly, like I said, I got to give props to Cassandra. I know that Cassandra had a really rough start for me personally. Like, you guys know, I was really hard on Cassandra's character when she got introduced into the present story. But Uru made her really awesome and made her a really likable character in this scenario. We started to get a little bit more about Cassandra and like her perspective on things in recent episodes. But here today, she was really cool. She thought things through. She took control of the situation despite being dampened. She protected Arlo. She took control. What little control she had, she used it. She said, all I need to do is survive. I need to make sure that we survive, and we're gonna survive. And honestly, it's nice to see a true queen at work, powerful enough to control the situation. Remy has done a lot of cool things herself. I'm not trying to discount Remy, but unfortunately, just due to John being a factor in the story, Remy hasn't necessarily been able to have a lot of control in a lot of moments. John's made it really difficult for her. I can say that as the number one. I can admit that as the number one John stan. John made a lot of things difficult. But Cassandra, despite being dampened, she had a moment and she's just said, we're making it out alive. And Cassandra owned it. And honestly, so like I said, Remy's not, bad or mean like the rest of them. But Remy has had her own moments, but she hasn't been able to really shine that much. Arlo, we've seen Arlo as a king, and Arlo was kind of a dick as a king. John was very much a dick as a king. Blake hasn't really gotten to do much as a king, other than kind of play off of Remy. He has protected everyone from John before, but he got his ass kicked. So, yeah. But seeing, a royal for once, who's inherently a good person and actually, able to, do something was really, really cool. So that's honestly awesome. But she's dying. She is really messed up. So Arlo calls over a healer. And this was really interesting because the healer that they brought with them bears a slight resemblance to someone. Now, like I said before, I think that this healer is Pyre. They have the same hair color as Pyre, definitely. But she also looks a bit like Elaine. I don't think that her hair color is exactly the same, but she does have a similar hair and text bubble color. So is it possible that this lady is Elaine's mom and Elaine gets her? She has orange eyes though. So does Elaine get hair from her mom and eyes from her dad then? We're going to have to wait and see. But I did think it was really interesting that there was a healer who looked a bit like Elaine and also had the healing ability. So we're going to have to wait and see. But maybe this is why Elaine tries to think so highly of herself, because her mom is a healer for the authorities. And she was in one of the uniforms that Valerie had on. So if she's on scale with Valerie, or if she's like a higher up healer, maybe that's why Elaine thinks so highly of herself, despite not being an actual high tier. But nonetheless, moving on. Valerie takes control of the situation, and along with her, we also meet Vert. We don't get a name drop for him in the story, but Uru does reveal him with the bonuses at the end of this episode. Now, like I said, I thought, it was a long shot. Oh, to be clear though, we get no name for the healer lady. We get no name whatsoever. I think Uru is trying to hold things off for the time being. So I think that's why there was no name reveal for her. So I'm going to say that's further proof, further hints that Uru is hiding stuff from us. This woman is clearly Pyre. But Bert is nowhere near Lumen, so I was wrong there, unfortunately. It's okay, though. But Candace takes note and is very furious, it seems. Her face says, like, shit, motherfucker. So it seems that her hatred for the authorities may actually be due to something in her past, as Oren mentioned previously. Or Oren kind of referred to previously. I am a little bit curious. I'm not gonna lie, Uru. I'm gonna let you cook a little bit. But while Liam and the Fire Girl then launch a projectile attacks, Valerie blocks it as Vert takes charge, rushing into battle and takes out some of the members with his ability, which is called Demolition. He sends like a projectile like X/ type thing with his arms, which like kind of like explodes on the ground. But then he just punches the two guys and completely wrecks them and kind of like knocks them down. And then Valerie restrains them with her own barriers. Now, Valerie's barrier variation, I want to talk about that real quick. It's like I mentioned previously, it's like diamonds shaped, and she like makes barrier walls with them. But not only that, she's also able to take individual diamonds of her barrier diamonds and like wrap them around people to restrain them. That's really cool. And we've seen Arlo do kind of like, restraining people with his barrier before. We saw that during this whole encounter to begin with. But it's really cool seeing what I'm going to say Arlo is a barrier pro. Valerie and John are barrier masters. So, yeah. But seeing them lose control over the situation, Orain calls everyone to retreat. And when we see this, we see his body where it actually is, laying down somewhere, but it is sweating a bit. I think that this is due to possibly him taking over a person's body is a lot more taxing on him, but it could actually be from the stress of the situation. But he tells his assistant, the lady on the phone who called for rain, to wipe all data from their computers and evacuate everyone from the building. So they're making their own move. He's clearly somewhere hidden within the building, but he had time to buy. He bought some time. He had more time. He had time before they got to him. Now, back with the action. The two agents get restrained, and we see Liam and Candace on the run. And here's the thing about this. I'm going to call major shenanigans on this. Spoiler alert, they get away. Now, I think that I can understand Liam not getting captured. Liam has the ability to turn himself into water and can go through drains, can go through pipes, that kind of thing. I can understand Liam being harder to catch. Candace was literally right there, wounded, in front of Valerie. Why didn't Valerie restrain her? Candace clearly could not get out of the barrier. Her arm was severely wounded. There was no way she was getting out. I think this has to do with Uru not being done with Candace yet. But I think that Candace should have easily been captured, honestly. But we do see Rain on the floor unconscious. Seems that Oren has left her body and everything. Oren has just said, whatever, I don't need her anymore. She's a traitor. So, yeah. But as Rain begins to wake back up, she gets restrained, bleeding, and she begins pleading to Cass to honor their deal. And Cassandra does try to explain the situation to Valerie, but Valerie brushes it off, saying that Rain was the one calling the shots earlier, clearly trying to fight back. Now, this is interesting because I thought my original idea for Oren taking over a person's body was that his voice would kind of also overwrite theirs a little bit. But Valerie does specifically point out Rain was the one calling the shots. So I guess that Oren really does just take over a person's body, but it's still their ability. Clearly, it's still their ability, their body, and their voice that he's able to speak through. That makes total sense. There was no real the indication I had that it was when he was in control over Rain's body and speaking, it was Oren's text bubble color appearing. So I thought that was an indication that it was his voice, but it would seem not. It would seem that it is still Rain's voice at the end of the day. Now, Cassandra tries to tell Valerie, I can explain what happened, but Valerie brushes it off, saying that they can't talk about it right then. And yeah, so we then cut to the hospital. Now, real quickly, I want to talk about Rain. Rain deserves to be free. And spoiler alert, again, Cassandra does not talk to Valerie about the situation with Rain for the rest of the episode. And I really hope this doesn't get skipped over, because like I mentioned before, Rain is innocent. And if it does get skipped over, I hope it gets referenced later on that Rain is free, or talked about off screen and mentioned that Rain's free later on. Because again, Rain didn't do anything wrong. Like I've said a lot of times already, Rain is just a student. She doesn't deserve to be a prisoner after being a prisoner because of Spectre. Serafina is a bit of a different circumstance. I can get why she's still a suspect, and I will say, Serafina also totally deserves to be free, but I do feel that Rain is a bit more innocent, so to speak. Rain was framed for murder by Oren himself. Rain was forced to do something out of her own control, and she was forced to do this and having her ability taken away. She ultimately chose to do this, but it was probably a choice between that or death, honestly. Let's be real. Serafina, on the other hand, Serafina, totally innocent. But Serafina knew the situation that she was in, and she's decided to go after this, to follow along, to get herself out of the situation. And now her friends have been dragged into it, so Serafina's basically on a motion of fuck Spectre. I'm doing all this my way. And I get it. I get why Serafina's a target. Serafina's done a lot more for Spectre, so again, I get why she is still a target, and that's personally why I feel that Rain is a bit more innocent than Serafina. But both of them clearly still deserve to be free nonetheless. But that's it with Rain. I really hope that I do highly doubt that Valerie is gonna budge and is actually gonna let Rain go free, but I would still really love to see Cassandra push for that, because Cassandra is a good person based on what we've seen. So I hope she doesn't forget about Rain. So yeah, if it does get skipped over, I'm willing to bet that next will be at Wellston or something. I would like to stay at the hospital and have a bit more discussion, but if we skip to Wellston, I hope it does get mentioned at least somewhere that Rain is back at Agwin as a normal student. As normal as she can be. The authorities definitely ain't going to help her get her ability back. But that's not Cassandra's fault. But we see Arlo in the hospital, reflecting on the fight and the whole encounter as a whole, going over everything, saying he wouldn't. He says, going over everything, he wouldn't have been so lucky if he didn't already know what he was getting into. He knew, based on previous experiences with Spectre, that there would have most likely been traps, and John also gave him a fair bit of information to go off of. So he also reflects on his power with his ability, seeing how much farther Valerie is ahead. Based on reflective damage, versatility, and everything. He even tries to kind of replicate that, tries to get a bit more creative with his barrier, using a vase as a target nearby in his room, but he ultimately breaks it. That's all we get from Arlo. I do think that I did really like this scene, honestly, seeing Arlo kind of reflect on everything. So I think that we're gonna get a bit of training for Arlo soon. And yeah, I think that's coming. And based on this, now, at the end of the episode, there are some stat sheets, but there's nothing updated for Arlo. So he's most likely still just a 6.3 for the time being. I thought, due to the emotional stress of the situation, maybe he would have had a bit of an increase. I did say, I thought his hands looked a little bit different from how they normally do. But based on no stat sheet changes from this episode, I guess that Arlo is still at a 6.3, and honestly, that's fine. So, but nonetheless, I did say I think training is coming up for Arlo. I do think we will see a level up for Arlo sometime in the near future. Now, Cassandra's room. We see her reflecting on the fight as well. Particularly before she's interrupted, we see her remembering that Candace had 2 abilities. Now, I do think that after the drops in this episode, after all the reveals and everything, I think that her and Arlo are going to talk things over about the mission and everything. And I do think that Arlo is going to decide, I can trust Cassandra. I'm going to bring Cassandra into everything. And I think that he's going to tell her a little bit more to catch her up to speed on everything. That he knew that they would have 2 abilities. And I would think he's going to tell her why they have 2 abilities. Because it's not Spectre's work. It's the authorities' work on this. That Spectre did steal. Now, I do still stand by that Cassandra can be trusted. I think it would totally make sense for Arlo to want to bring her up to speed on this. But we then see Valerie show up in her room and break the news that Oren and a few others got away, most likely Liam and Candace. And the information was all wiped, but they were able to capture a few members. And I suspect that Keon is going to have a very busy schedule going through everyone. Now, along with that, though, I do think that if Rain is restrained, along with the other members and everything, if they're all in custody, I do think that Liam is going to try something at a prison holding to kind of take them all out again. Uru, please don't kill Rain. Please don't kill Rain. Please don't do this. But seeing as how what happened last time, I think the authorities might be prepared to handle Liam, seeing as how Terrence was murdered and everything. But nonetheless. So, Cass then offers to report everything that she encountered while on the mission to Valerie. Now, going back to the previous discussion with Arlo, I do think that Valerie will also make note of that, of everything that she saw clearly being dampened and everything, which I don't think the authorities have. Well, They know about it, all the route and hill incident and everything. But the two abilities, I think Valerie will, if Valerie does get that reported to her, I think Valerie will look at that and like, okay, they're working through our stuff and they're doing it a bit faster and everything. So there's that red flag there. But Valerie, after Cassandra tells Valerie she'll report everything, Valerie actually informs her that she's been chosen to lead the investigation on Spectre. Honestly, way to go, Cass. You definitely earned that. Now, let's be real for a second. This should have gone to Arlo since he is the one who brought all this up. Makes total sense that an intern isn't getting that kind of assignment, though. Arlo is still just an intern. He's still just in high school. He's still just a new recruit. Cassandra is someone with tenure with the authorities. So, totally makes sense that Cassandra is the one thought to have been in charge, because she was. Arlo said, hey, I got some information. I don't know what to do. Cassandra said, hey, let's go check this out. This is an official assignment. I'm bringing you with me. Totally makes sense that this credit is going to Cassandra. But Cassandra does also ask that Arlo be included on this assignment because he helped her out a lot. She doesn't mention necessarily that it was him who got a hold of all the information, but Cassandra does, return the favor and say, hey, I couldn't have done this without Arlo, so I'd like him to work with me on this. And Valerie does say she'll put in a request for that. Now, this isn't 100% promotion, but I do think that this will get Cass a bit more footing to help everyone out get clearance for Spectre's victims and force participants like Sarah and Rain. We're going to have to wait and see, but I do think this is really good grounds for Cassandra, and I do think she'll probably get a promotion if things go smoothly from here. Now, I really hope that, like I said, Uru is not going to be cutting to the next day, because after this, she probably will. But I do think a few more discussions at the hospital need to be heard. We could probably cut to Wellston at the middle of the episode, but we might skip to a different scene altogether after this. But with all this, I still think that season 2 is going to be going on for a bit longer. I don't think we're beating Oren this season. We probably still could. Uru probably could still cook something up a little bit and do it really well. But I'm not sure if it will actually happen before the season's end. So what I'm thinking is probably, if it doesn't end before, I do think the first half of season 3 will be defeating Oren and kind of Spectre, and kind of like probably working with Spectre a little bit, getting them back to their actual original goal. And then the second half of season 3 is taking on Ember. But then again, Uru could absolutely throw a major curveball and have the reveal of Valerie being Ray's killer drop to both Arlo and Cassandra, who are the last ones who need to know. That could probably be a season finale, part of the season finale. But who knows? We're going to have to look at that. Overall, like I said, the episode is really good. A bit shorter, focused on the authorities arriving, like I mentioned. And honestly, I do think Liam and Candace got away a bit too easy, if I'm being honest. Maybe there's something there, probably not, but we did get levels. So Vert, the guy with Demolition, who was part of Valerie's crew, he's got Demolition, which is a pretty cool ability name, and I think it's a really cool idea, but he is a 5.7, possibly a perfect enemy for Remy down the line. Remy versus Vert, that'd be pretty cool, honestly. But Cassandra is a god tier, and she is stronger than Arlo. I called it. She's got particles, like Arlo mentioned before. She is a 6.8. And honestly, like I said, I thought that she would be stronger than Arlo. Her ability level then was 4. No, not 4. I'm tripping. What's your ability? A 3.6. Mageki. One moment. What was your halved level, Cassandra? 3.4. Why was that so hard for me? What the hell? And also, I actually noticed there's no halved out stat sheet for Cassandra on this episode. Strange. Anyway, I called that she was stronger than Arlo, and I'm happy. I'm curious what her passive could be then. But Valerie has Barrier. It's just called Barrier. That's fine. That's what it is ultimately. But when Arlo mentioned a way back when, he specifically did say that she had a variation of his Barrier. I thought that there would be a different name to it, but it is also interesting to think that Arlo's Barrier is seemingly hereditary within his family. But her level is a 7.5. And I think that's kind of a show that she's the perfect opponent for John and Arlo down the line. But let's be real. We talked about this during the reaction. Most of the forms of John that we've seen throughout the series would fuck her up, no questions asked. But either way, with her, we do get a good glimpse at what Arlo should be capable of if he trains hard enough and hardens his mastery of Barrier. And also, I am interested to see what John would be capable of if he got a hold of her Barrier. If John got a hold of Arlo's Barrier and went up against her, she's done for, honestly. But who knows? We'll have to wait and see. Either way, this episode is still pretty solid. And honestly, I'd give this episode a level 8. All things considered. It's really good. Honestly, a few complaints, but they're honestly minor. And the episode is overall really good. So, we'll just have to wait and see what happens here. And, yeah. Things are picking up. So, as always, everyone, thank you all so much for watching. And as always, everyone, see you, Space Cowboy.